Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to be talking about the musical alphabet in relation to the bass. Now, there are 12 notes altogether, and these are just repeated in the same order in different frequencies across the bass fretboard, whether going lower or higher. Now, these are called octaves, so when you reach 12 notes, you then repeat the same pattern up an octave higher. You can do the same an octave lower. We'll talk a little bit more about octaves, octave intervals later in this lesson. As a child, when we are learning to read and write, we learn all the letters of the alphabet. Now, the musical alphabet uses the same concept, so we're taking all of the same letters in the same order, but all we're doing is up to the first 7 letters of the alphabet. So we have A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. These 7 notes are known as natural notes, and once we reach G, we start again, so we move back to A. So it's a repeating pattern, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, then back to A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on. Okay, so we have our 7 natural notes. We're missing another 5 notes to finish our musical alphabet. These 5 notes contain sharps and flats and are known as accidentals. These notes relate to the natural notes, so depending on where they fit in between, they can either be a sharp or flat. Okay, so the sharp symbol, which looks like this, means that you play 1 note higher than your natural notes, or 1 fret higher. So on the bass, for example, if we play the 5th fret on the E string, which is an A note, and move up, that would be A sharp. So A to A sharp. So applying this to a fretboard diagram, we have the A on the 5th fret, then moving up 1, we have an A sharp. So the sharp means to move up 1 note or 1 fret. And a flat looks a little something like this. And this means to move down 1 note or down 1 fret. So if we went to the 7th fret on the E string, this would be a B, and then going down 1 fret or 1 note, that would be B flat. Now let's apply this to a fretboard diagram. So we've got the 7th fret, which is a B, and if we're going down, it's a B flat. So what you would have noticed before, if we go down another fret, so the fifth fret is an A. When we go up or ascend, it's actually an A sharp. If I change that to an A sharp, but then if we go to the B and then descend backwards, that turns in to a B flat. So this can be a bit confusing to understand at first. So A sharp and B flat are exactly the same note. It depends on whether you're ascending or descending what you would call it. So if you're going up, it'd be an A sharp. If you're going down, it's a B flat. If you're in a certain key, this would change the situation again. So let's say, for example, the key of G has 1 sharp in it. Don't worry if you don't understand this, but the key of G has 1 sharp, which is an F sharp. So you'd go F, which is on the 1st fret, and go up 1, F sharp. That would also be G flat, but because we're in the key of G, we know to call it an F sharp. So essentially, if you're not playing in any key, when you ascend, you would call it a sharp. When you descend, a flat. And if you're in a certain key, you would differentiate which one you'd use. The same note sharing multiple names is known as an enharmonic note. So we have 5 of those in the musical alphabet, and these are between all of your natural notes, which we will go into much more detail later in this video. Okay, so let's fill in all of the gaps of our musical alphabet. So we've got our 7 natural notes. We have A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And in between some of these notes, we have our 5 accidentals. So in between A and B, we have A sharp and B flat. So these are enharmonic once again. So A flat, A sharp, and B flat are exactly the same note. When you ascend from A to the next note, 1 fret up, it will be called A sharp. If you descended from B, going backwards or down a fret, that would be B flat. In between B and C, there are no sharps or no flats. literally that would be B, then C. So in terms of the bass, the 7th fret here on the E string is a B. The next note up wouldn't be B sharp, it's just C. But we'll go into more details about that. In between C and D, there is C sharp and D flat. Then in between D and E, there is D sharp and E flat. In between E and F, like B and C, there is no accidentals. Let's give an example on the bass. So an open E, the next note up wouldn't be E sharp, it would be F. So they're the 2 notes in the musical alphabet, well the 4 notes, where between them there is no accidentals. So between F and G, we have F sharp and G flat. And then finally between G, and remember we go back to A after G, between G and A there is a G sharp and A flat. Right, so that is your musical alphabet. It looks a bit crazy with my writing, but don't worry, I'm going to be giving you a nice clear sheet you can download, a nice PDF file with this lesson. So don't panic if you cannot read my terrible writing. Okay, but they are the 12 notes. So we have A, we have A sharp or B flat, which are exactly the same. We then have B. In between B and C, there's no notes, so it goes B, then C. We have, after C, we've got C sharp or D flat. Then we've got D, D sharp, then E flat, E, F, F sharp or G flat, G, G sharp, then A flat, back to A. So that's our 12 notes, our 12 musical notes. Okay, so there are 3 essential things you need to remember about the musical alphabet, just to summarize. So first of all, there are 7 natural notes, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. These just repeat in that same order. And then number 2, in between some of these notes, there are 5 accidentals, which contain either sharps or flats. A sharp means to move up a note or up a fret on the bass, and a flat means to move down a fret or down a note. And thirdly, to help you know where those accidentals are, there are no notes between B and C and E and F. To help you remember that, you could use an acronym like Big Cats Eat Fish, or whatever you want to use. Okay, so before we apply the musical alphabet to the bass, let's look at 2 ways you can recite the musical alphabet. So the first way would be to ascend, which is going up in pitch using sharps, and the second way is descending, so going down in pitch using flats. So for example, if we start with A, our next note would be A sharp. After that, it would be B. And we know there's no sharps or flats or any notes between B and C, so then it goes C. Then we've got C sharp. And then going up again, we've got D. Then we've got D sharp. And then E. There's no sharps and flats between E and F. So we've got F next. Then we've got F sharp. And then G. And then G sharp. And then finally back to A, which would be an octave higher. This is where we're doubling the frequency of a note. So for example, if I played an A note on the 5th fret here, on the low E, that's an A note. If we went up 12 notes, so from A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, that would be your A note again, an octave higher. And an octave is doubling the frequency, and then we'd start again, there would be 12 notes going up an octave until we run out of frets. We'll go through this further later on, but that is how you would recite the musical alphabet, by ascending or going up in pitch. So we're thinking going this way. Now, how do we go back this way? This gets a bit more difficult and messes with your brain, so let me get rid of all this quickly. Delete, delete, delete. Now we're going to descend using the musical alphabet from A. So first of all, we've got A, then we've got A flat. Don't worry, this messes with your head, even though I'm very good at my theory, this still messes with my head, but it's good practice. Then we've got G, And then if we descend again, we've got G flat, and then we've got F. There's no flats or sharps between E and F, so we're going to E. Oh, I don't know what's happened there. And then before that, we've got E flat, and then we've got D, D flat, C, and between B and C, there's no sharps or flats, so we've got B, B flat. Oh, I'm doing quite well. B flat, and then A. Okay, so let's count the notes. I should have 12 up to the next octave. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we've got our 12 notes. I haven't messed up. Okay, so if we went from the A on the 17th fret and we went down, we would get this. So we'd get A flat, G, G flat, and so on. And we'd land on an A on the 5th fret, which would be an octave lower, which is half the frequency of our first note when we descend. That is how you recite the musical alphabet when you're ascending with sharps and descending with flats. I highly recommend that you practice doing what I just did. You don't have to start from A. This is a good test. You could, for example, let me delete this. If we started from, let's say, B and we ascended using sharps. So from B, we've got B. There's no sharps or flats between B and C. So C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, no sharps and flats in E and F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, and then back to B, squeezing it in there. So we've got our octave there. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I've not messed up there. And you can do that from all 12 or randomly test yourself starting from, let's say, F, and then try and get your musical alphabet back to F again, an octave higher. So hopefully you're understanding that this just repeats. And if you had a bass guitar that had infinite frets on here, if you started from the A string, you went up 12 notes, you get an A, you went up another 12 notes, you get another A an octave higher, and you just keep going up and up and up and up, that pattern will just repeat and repeat. Okay, so that would be a really good homework assignment. I don't like to call it homework assignment because that gives me chills of being at school, but if you really want to learn this alphabet inside out and as quickly as possible, the best method that I've found is to do what I said, is just write out the alphabet, starting at different points, let's say from C, and then get to your 12 notes, then you should reach C again, start from D, and you can even start from your accidentals, so start from B flat and then either descend, or you could do A sharp and descend. And in no time, you'll know the musical alphabet. It doesn't change. So on all stringed instruments, including guitar, bass, violin, cello, you name it, all of these instruments work in the same way. They have the same musical alphabet. So by learning this, you're going to allow yourself to be able to communicate with other musicians and really understand music theory. If you don't learn this musical alphabet first, it's going to really hinder any of your future endeavors in learning chords, scales, arpeggios, and this is very important for your development, and it will allow you to have a lot more fun on the instrument. So spend some time learning that. Okay, so let's now apply the musical alphabet to the bass. Hopefully this will make things even clearer. So first of all, make sure you learn the names of the 4 strings inside out. So we have an E, we have an A D, and a G. You can use acronyms to help you remember the name of these strings, such as Eddie ate dynamite, gross, elephants always do good, every apple dies good, eat all the grapes. Anything you come up with that has obviously uses E, A, D, G, then that's great. I just used to think E'd then G, just spelling out E-A-D then G, and that worked for me. But I do quite like the Eddie ate dynamite, gross. So Eddie ate dynamite, gross, E-A-D-G. So the reason this is so important to learn the names of the strings is because we have 4 different points where we can build the musical alphabet. Okay, so let's start with the E string. So we have the open E, and then if we go upper fret or upper note, we know there's no sharps or flaps between E and F, so it's an F. And then if we go up again, we have an F sharp, but we could also call this a G flat. We're going to keep these all to sharps for now, and what I'll do is I will export a PDF with both the sharps and the flats for your reference. So if we go up again, another fret, we've got a G, and upper fret again, we've got a G sharp or an A flat, then we've got an A, then we've got an A sharp or B flat. Let's change that to A sharp. Then we've got a B, and then there's no sharps between B and C, so C, and then C sharp or D flat, and then D, D sharp or E flat, then E. And coincidentally, that's the 12th fret, so that makes sense. We've gone up 12 notes from our open E string, so we've got E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E. And we could continue up the fretboard, so we've now reached an octave. So exactly the same note, an octave higher, and the musical alphabet just repeats again, but it's just doubled in frequency, so it's up higher. And then we could just carry on doing the musical alphabet. So we've got an F, which is an octave above the first fret. And then we've got F sharp, we go up again. We've then got G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C. These notes don't sound great up high. C sharp, and then D. And hopefully you're seeing that you could just continue this if you had more frets, if you had an infinite amount of frets, this same pattern would just carry on up the fretboard. Okay, so let's go to the A string. This is a lot more fun because, or a lot more relatable, because we're starting with our first note of the alphabet that we know and love and learnt as a kid. And it's exactly the same thing. So we've got the open A note, which essentially, if we look at the 5th fret, we'll talk about this in an intervals lesson, but this is actually exactly the same note as your open A. So the 5th fret, as you can see here, that is your A, and it's the same note as your A. Exactly the same frequency, it's just the way the bass guitar is tuned. But going back to building intervals, or building the musical alphabet on one string, so we've got an open A, then we've got A sharp, B, no sharps and flats between B and C, then we've got the 4th fret C sharp, then D, D sharp, E, F, there's no sharps and flats, F sharp on the 9th fret, and then G, G sharp, and then A. So we've got an octave. So what you'll start to notice, we will see every time we reach the 12th fret, it will be exactly the same note as an octave below. Once again, so that is the same note as the A but an octave higher. If we carried on going up to the 13th fret, we would get A sharp, then would B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E. So on, let's just fill it out. So B, C, what's next? C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G. You could also see this, so if we go down to the open A, we'd have A sharp or B flat, C sharp or D flat, D sharp or E flat, F sharp or G flat, A flat or, G sharp or A flat, and so on and so forth. Hopefully you're getting the idea. We can continue with this just so it really sinks in. Let's go to the D string. So It's all the same patterns, just repeated all over the fretboard. I know this kind of looks a bit crazy as we're filling it out, but just try and concentrate on building that musical alphabet. So we've got a D, then we'd have D sharp, then E. There's no sharps and flats between E and F. We've got an F. On the 4th fret, we've got an F sharp. 5th fret, we'd have a G. G sharp or A flat. We've got an A sharp or B flat, then B. C, between B and C there's no sharps or flats. C sharp, and then D, D sharp, E, F. You're getting the idea, hopefully. I won't continue that, let's just fill that all out. So, musical alphabet again, D, then going up to the 12th fret, an octave higher, so D, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Exactly the same note, an octave higher, doubled in frequency, and then we continue up the scale or up the musical alphabet until we run out frets. Once again, we just do the final string, why not? G. What's next? You got it, G sharp. Then we've got A sharp, B and C. There's no sharps or flats. The 6th fret, we've got C sharp, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, and then G. You got the idea. G sharp. Well, there we go. There's the before we go. That's the 12th fret G. So there's the octave. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And we just continue the musical alphabet. So G sharp, A sharp, B, C, C sharp, C sharp, D sharp, E, then F. And if we look at this, so our open strings here, you'll notice on the 12th fret here, they're all exactly the same. Everything after a certain point, so everything past the 12th fret is just repeated. It's exactly the same notes as everything down here, but an octave higher. Now, the great thing about guitar and bass is, as I was saying earlier, you have the same notes in different places, they're the same frequency. This allows us to play scales and chords and arpeggios over strings. For example, we don't have to play a G major scale on one string like this, or you can. We can play it across strings like this. And it allows us to stay in one position of the neck. So that is why the guitar is tuned with different strings. We'll go into more detail about how that is affected by different intervals. But for now, this lesson is just about the musical alphabet. Okay, so you can download PDFs Part 1, which has all of your natural notes and all the sharps on the fretboard, the bass. Part 2 has all the natural notes and the flats. And Part 3 just has the natural notes. So let's talk about how you can learn the musical alphabet on the bass. It is ridiculously daunting looking at all of those notes when you've got all the sharps and flats on the fretboard diagram. Let's break it down on one string and how I recommend you start learning where all these notes are. So I would just take the natural notes, and what you'll notice on your bass is you have fretboard markers. So you've got one on the 3rd fret, the 5th, 7th, 9th and 12th. So the 2 dots on the 12th fret are your reference for the 12th note. And obviously if we're playing our open notes, so an open E, we know on the 12th fret we've got an E again. So that's a great reference if you're playing in the key of E, or D, or A, or D, or G, you know where your octaves are. And we've also got fretboard markers on the 15th, 17th, 19th and 21st frets. All depends on how many frets you have on your bass. Now, we're going to use these markers to help us learn where the natural notes are. Once again, the most important thing, as I mentioned earlier, is learn your open strings first. And then what we can do is say for a week, let's learn the natural notes on the E string. So if we work out what's on these dots, we've got a G, we've got an A and a B that land on the 3rd, 5th and 7th. So that's a great reference point. So I know there's a G on the 3rd fret, A on the 5th fret, and a B on the 7th fret. So they're good markers. What about the 9th fret? So we've actually got a C sharp or D flat. So let's not think about that. Let's just think about the 3rd, 5th and 7th. We know that the 12th fret is going to be our same note again. Then the first marker after the 2 dots on the 15th fret is going to be G. So this is going to be the same pattern again, G, A and B. So we've already know where our open E is, we know where G is, A, B and then E. So what I would recommend that you do is you practice that. So we know that B, A, test yourself, G, E, an octave is an E again. And then once you get to know, that's only what, 4 notes to learn, spend a week or 2 doing that until you can just, even without picking up the bass, you can go 3rd fret G, 5th fret is A, 7th fret is B, 12th is E. And then you can start filling in more gaps. You want to know where the F is? Okay, where's the F? Okay, it lands on there. But you know after E, it comes F, there's no sharps or flats. With the C, that's filling the C, which is just after the B, which you've learned inside out. And all we're missing now from the natural notes is the D, which is going to be in between that C and E. So you can start filling in these gaps. There we go, and we've basically got the whole of the musical alphabet learned in a couple of weeks inside out by filling in the gaps. So you get E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E. And you've actually learnt C major scale, even though we're not starting on the C, but that is all the notes from the C major scale or the A minor scale. C major and A minor are relative scales, meaning they share the same notes. We will be talking about this in future lessons, so don't worry if you don't understand that. But essentially, with all the natural notes, you have C major. And finally, all you want to do when you're playing is fill in the gaps. So when you start to know where your F is, you know your F sharp is going to be 1 fret afterwards. We can fill that in. Let's make that sharp. We know the G's here and the A's here, so it must be a G sharp or A flat in between. Let's call that a G sharp. So let's fill in the gap here. A between B, A sharp or B flat, that's called the A sharp. Between the C and D, we have a C sharp or D flat. In between the D and E, we've got an E flat or a D sharp. So that's how my brain works. I try and use the natural notes and then fill in the gaps later. You don't need to know where F sharp is. That takes time. It's probably taken me 10 years or more to know where all the notes are naturally, instinctively. It doesn't come overnight. It's done gradually. Don't beat yourself up that you can't learn the notes in a short amount of time. It does take time. And the more chords, the more songs, the more repertoire you build, the more you can get to know these notes. The first stage, which you're doing in this lesson, which is amazing, is learning the musical alphabet. And just understanding there's 12 notes, they're all in order, and you know that there's no gaps between B and C, E and F, and so on. And you can build the alphabet, even if you can't play on every string. That is a massive step in progressing on this instrument, and very key indeed. Very key indeed. Okay, so let's get rid of all these. Actually, let me build this again. So there, we've got all the notes in between. There you go. There is essentially almost 2 octaves. If we go to the D, if we had another 2 more frets, we'd go D sharp, then E, we'd actually have 3 octaves. So we could go up to, let me add, so if we had a 24 fret guitar, we'd go up D sharp, then E. So we'd actually have 3 octaves. So we've got 1 E here, 1 E here, and 1 E here. So we're going through, well, we're starting on 3 octaves. So you'd have an E, and then another E right up here, which would be this note. But because of the way, this is what I'm saying about, this is really exciting about the bass, is because you've got different strings tuned to different notes, you can actually find that note somewhere else. So that's essentially 3 octaves. Next up, let's move on to the A string. So we've got the open A, the 3rd fret, what is that? So A sharp, B, C. We've got a C, that's great. So we've got a natural note on the 3rd fret. Then we've got a C sharp, we don't want that. On the 5th fret, we've got a D. Then what have we got on the 7th fret? So D, D sharp, E, cool. What's on the 9th fret? F sharp. Okay, we don't want that because we don't want any sharps and flats. And of course, the 12th fret is going to be our A an octave higher. And then once again, as we understand, this is the same notes on these dots up here on the 15th, 17th and 19th an octave higher. And if we had 24 frets, we'd reach another octave. So that's what you want to learn. So we know A, 3rd fret is C, D, E, A. C, D, E, A. So we're using these dots as markers and reference points. You see where I'm going here? Once you've spent a week or so testing yourself, you don't need to have the instrument in your hand. You can just think, what is on that 3rd fret? That's C. That's E on the 7th, sorry, D, and so on. And you can even test yourself. So you want to add in what's missing. So where's that B? You know that's 1 note below the C. There is no sharps and flats between the B and C. And then where's that? Where's the E? After that, there's the F. And then once again, between the F and the A, there's the G. So you've completed and filled in the gaps. That's your next step. And once again, all of the natural notes are C major or A minor. So if we play up this scale now, we actually have A minor scale, or C major scale if we started from the C. But don't worry too much. Once again, if you're not understanding about keys and things, we'll get to that in another music theory lesson. But essentially, all of the natural notes, if you just played them all over the fretboard, you'd be playing in the key of either C major or A minor. Both of these scales share exactly the same notes. Let me quickly talk a little bit further as we're progressing. So the reason you'd make it a major scale is you play a major C major chord, and if you played that scale, it would sound like C major or be implying C major. If you then played an A minor chord underneath it, you'd be implying A minor. Don't worry if you don't understand that. Just wanted to start getting these bits of information into your head as we are progressing through these lessons. Okay, so once again, between the rest of these, once you get comfortable, you can start filling in the sharps. There we go. There is all our sharps. And as I said before, I try not to I don't even really remember the sharps and flats. I'm really thinking about all my natural notes and then filling the gaps in between. So our next step is to build the alphabet on the D string. Same idea. What's on the 3rd fret? We have an F, cool. On the 5th fret we have a G. The 7th fret we have an A, cool. What is on the 9th fret? We've got a B. So in matter of fact, we have a lot more notes on the D string we can reference to with our markers, which is pretty cool. So we've actually, and then on the 12th fret, of course, we've got the D. So we've actually got 5 reference points. So we know we've got D, F, G, A, B, back to D. So once again, we can put these on the fretboard, on the markers going up the frets. So you'd spend some time learning that. So practicing the 3rd fret, that's an F, and so on and so forth. And then once again, you start filling the gaps. Where's that E? There's the E just before the F. There's no sharps and flats between that. After the B is a C. and so on and so forth. And then after a week or two, you add the sharps and flats. And finally, let's have a look at the G string. So we've got the open G. What is on the 3rd fret? The 3rd fret is A sharp, so that's no use to us. We want all natural notes. C on the 5th fret, that's cool. 7th is D, 9th is E, and then 12th is G, of course. And then we can continue up the A sharps, no use to us. So on the 17th, 19th and 21st frets. And then if we've got an octave, another octave, there we go. So we've got G, we have a C, D, E, and then a G again, C, D, E. So spend some time learning those natural notes that land on the markers. And then once you're comfortable with them, you can fill in the rest of the natural notes. So we know the B is behind the C. We know the F is after the E. And our last one would be the A between the G and the B. So essentially, hopefully you're starting to see the pattern now. Learn all of the notes on the fret markers, and then you can fill in the gaps with the rest of them later. And the more you kind of do this over time, the easier it gets to find notes on the fretboard. You'll find, well, a lot of players find that they know the E string inside out, but the other strings are a lot more hazy. The quicker you kind of incorporate this kind of practice into your routine, the quicker it will start sinking in. It does take a few months, even years, to learn a fretboard. I wouldn't worry about learning it as fast as you can. It's not an issue. It's just important that you actually understand the musical alphabet itself and how it works on a fretboard. Okay, as we said before, we've filled in the gaps again. So G sharp, A sharp, C sharp, D sharp, F sharp, and then it's all the same an octave higher. So to summarize, in learning the musical alphabet on the fretboard, don't worry too much about the sharps and flats. The only thing you've got to worry about is actually understanding the order itself and how to ascend and descend it. You just need to use reference points on the bass, which is your markers, which is on 3, 5, 7, 9, 12, 15, 17, 19, 21. Should be the same on most instruments. But yes, that is how I recommend approaching learning the musical alphabet on the bass. Okay, so last of all, let me talk about 2 different ways you can practice the musical alphabet on the bass. And what I recommend doing is choosing a string, let's say the A string, and we're going to ascend, which means to move up in pitch through the musical alphabet. So we're going to use sharps, and you want to say as you play it. So A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. And right at the 12th fret, you should actually reach the same note you started on. And that's how you know you've done it correctly. Then the same thing on the G string, so G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F sharp, G. And you know once again that you had the right notes. So you can do that with a metronome as well if you want to make things a bit harder and get some kind of pressure with time. So you can do notes on a beat. So this is 50 beats per minute. 1, 2, 3, 4, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, so on and so forth. That's some time constraints you can add. So I recommend doing that ascending, but also do it descending. So let's say with the E string, start on the 12th fret and then go down. So E, E flat, D, D flat, C, B, B flat, that nearly threw me there, A flat, G, G flat, F, E. so on and so forth. Apply that to all 12 strings, all 4 strings. You can start in different places. Of course, be aware if you go lower than 12 frets, you're not going to be able to get to the lower octave because you don't have enough strings going backwards. If we had frets going back this way, we can continue going down octaves. But yes, that's 2 different ways you can practice learning the alphabet verbally and also with your actual instrument itself. Okay, so that's it for this lesson. I don't want you to panic about learning musical alphabet inside out on the bass. Right away, it takes time. It took me many years, and I've been playing lots of songs, chords and arpeggios. And by doing this, you do slowly learn the fretboard. But the most important thing to take away from this lesson is the order of the 12 notes of the alphabet. To understand there's 7 natural notes, A, B, C, D, E, F and G. There are 5 accidentals in between these 7 notes, apart from B and C and E and F. So all of those have the 5 accidentals. And then you're good to go. That is the musical alphabet. From these 12 notes, we create chords, we create scales, we create arpeggios. Songs are written, massive orchestrated pieces are written from these 12 notes. So once you understand that, the world is your oyster. We can start applying music theory to the scales, the chords, arpeggios, etc., etc. It's very exciting. This is the beginning of your music theory journey. Get practicing with that and then move on to the next lesson where we'll look at intervals.